All right, we will go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. and do a quick roll call. We have Tess Taylor.
Here.
Kelly is excused. I do not see Ren. Sean.
Here.
And Catherine is here. So we've got quorum with 3 committee members.
All right.
First up is, and it looks like we've got about 5 members of the public. If you are calling in, just a reminder that to raise your hand, you would press *9. And obviously, if you are in Zoom on a computer, you can go ahead and just use the raise hand function when it's time to speak. All right, first up on the agenda is minutes. We have motion A, approve the GTLNC April 5th, 2022 Governmental Affairs Committee minutes. Do I have a first?
First, Tess.
Thank you, Tess. Do I have a second?
It's Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Any discussion on the minutes?
Oh, I don't have notes on this. No, it's not for me. No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Any members of the public that have comments on the minutes? Hearing none, seeing none. Let's proceed with a vote on motion A to approve the April 5th Governmental Committee minutes. How do you vote, Tess?
Yes.
How do you vote, Sean?
That would be a yes.
And Catherine is a yes as well. Motion carries. Minutes are passed 3-0-0. Thank you all. Which brings us to public comment period. We've got 2 minutes per speaker on a subject that is relevant to Governmental Affairs Committee, but not on the agenda. All right. First up is Rudy. Rudy, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Catherine. Hi, Tess. Hi, Sean. Good evening.
Hello.
I wanted to say hello. Appreciate the work you're doing. I'm glad you guys have a Government Affairs Committee. Most neighborhood councils don't. As you know, there is an election cycle coming up, and we're all going to be getting our ballots in about 2 weeks. And I know some of you already know this, but I made the ballot for Congressional District 29. And I was hoping that our San Fernando Valley area neighborhood councils would organize a candidate debate or a candidate forum. I don't think that's going to happen before the primary, but we intend to advance to November. And I hope that this Government Affairs Committee would consider advocating for a candidate forum before November, so that we can get, our elected officials on board, get the candidates on board, and introduce, stakeholders to the candidates, because they need to know that they have a choice. And I hope to earn your support. I appreciate the work that you all do. I know how hard it is. I've been on 2 neighborhood councils. In any event, if you'd like to reach me directly, rudy@rudymelendez.com. You can call me at 818-761-1773. I guess maybe I'll see you at the next monthly board meeting. But anyhow, thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce myself again. Appreciate the work you all are doing. Have a great night.
I have a quick comment regarding voting and candidate forums, which I'm all in favor of. And Rudy, perhaps you could email me, tess.taylor@gtlnc.org, and Catherine.Hatton. Our emails are on the GTLNC website with, are you proposing like the congressional or the assembly candidate forum? If you just send us a quick email, because I would really like to do that. But did anyone else get this voter registration, pre-registration application? I've never seen this before. Did you get one, Catherine?
A pre-registration application? I'm sorry.
A pre-registration, a voter registration pre-registration application. I've never seen this before.
The only thing that you would be allowed to pre-register is if you were a minor. I don't believe that you can pre-register as an adult. You would just register.
Yeah, I just wondered if anybody else had gotten this. I just thought it was really sort of odd, you know. Anyway,
Tess, I could, Catherine's right. If you're 17 and you want to pre-register to vote, you can do so. And so when you turn 18, you're automatically registered to vote. But just to quickly answer your question, I think with the boundary of the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council, it'd be great to invite candidates running for state assembly,
okay.
and congressional district and county supervisor, and then perhaps citywide candidates if they were interested in appearing. But
Okay.
I will send you that email. Thank you very much for engaging with me and appreciate you. Thank you. Good night.
Good. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Any other general public comment on an item not already on this evening's agenda? Seeing no hands up, we'll move on to committee member news and announcements. Any committee member news and announcements related to the governmental committee?
Nothing that's not already on the agenda as of now.
I am of like mind.
Okay.
All right. Then let's move on to ongoing business. First up is discussion regarding regional housing needs assessment and its effect on Los Angeles and the GTLNC, as well as a review of the California State Auditor's report on the RHNA.
That's
Yes.
Rena. Yes. So I asked to have that agendized, and I thank you, Catherine. So a lot of people wonder what's going on with housing, and there's so much legislation happening and densification happening all over the place, and it sort of hits people before they know what's going on if they're not paying attention to the legislative process, and it's difficult to keep up with, that's for sure. But the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which is whose acronym is RHNA, is something that was done by the state in order to determine what housing allocations will be necessary based on growth projections. And this has triggered a whole lot of legislation and frankly, building. So the Department of Housing and Community Development, which is known as HCD, and its regional housing needs assessments are said to have inflated these requirements by hundreds of thousands of housing units, according to the California State Auditor, Michael Tilden. He came out with a report in March of this year and sent a letter to the governor and to legislative leaders because this, these numbers are very concerning. If the building happens according to the projections calculated by RHNA, there's a fear that there will be a great deal of overbuilding. And what does that mean? That means more density in neighborhoods. And while I think most people don't object to development per se, there is great concern regarding overdevelopment, which I share, and frankly was one of the things which got me fired up to get involved with neighborhood council matters in the first place. So the California Alliance of Local Electeds has called for an audit and supports the state auditor's findings. The major points of contention within the auditor's report include inconsistent vacancy rates, improper benchmarking and comparisons, omissions, overcount, inconsistencies in housing unit projections, and lack of documentation and methodology to support findings. So these are things that I think are important to be aware of. I would be happy to share some of these materials, articles, and the auditor's report with anybody who may have an interest. I can be reached at tess.taylor@gtlnc.org. And I think it's very important for us to keep an eye on this. One of the recommendations that's being made by one of the organizations that one of the sort of watchdog organizations is that we slow down the fifth cycle of RHNA, and that gets a little bit complicated into the cycles of RHNA because this building happens in cycles, not all at once, obviously. So there's also a concern that the RENA numbers, the projected numbers were based on concentrated job growth that was assumed to remain constant over a long period of time throughout Los Angeles, throughout the Bay Area, throughout all industries. And that critics of the RENA numbers say that those are unreasonable, if not insane assumptions, because if you had, 50 years ago predicted this with Manhattan, it would have been 3 times the population it has now. So we have to, look more carefully at these numbers and make sure that our calculations are based on solid data and not bad data, shall we say. So that's what I have to say about that. Are there any questions?
Is there an action that you're requesting the NC take on this, or is there an action that the NC could take on this? Or at this point, is this just a tracking and we are providing information to the community on updates as this moves forward?
That's a good point. I think that a request to a support of the California State Auditor's recommendation and a call for an audit would be good. Yeah, so we can, I would make a motion that we ask for but this is a state level, this is a state level matter. So
do you know if the LA City Council has taken any position on this or any action? Because sometimes they will take a position on a state level item, whether it's legislation, whether it is them supporting the audit.
Well, I know that there's a related discussion about the housing element, which we're going to discuss at the Planning and Land Use meeting probably this coming Monday. As of right now, I do not know, but I will find out. And if so, we can propose that at the next general board meeting. So if the city council is taking an action on that or not. So yeah, my motion would be, assuming that's the case, that I make a motion that the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council make a request for action, write a request for action letter that we call for an audit of these RENA numbers and a review of the findings.
Okay, so you wouldn't be making a motion here because it's not on the agenda. But essentially what you're saying is that you are going to, one, look into whether or not the city council already has action related to this, and then add to the general meeting agenda for this month a motion for GTLNC to take a position in favor of the audit.
Yes.
If there is no city council action on this, are you going to propose a motion that we draft a letter of action requesting that the city council take a position on this?
Yeah, I would do that.
Okay.
Hey,
Great.
Tess, could you forward me that information?
Sure.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from the public on this matter? Once again, if you are dialing in, you can press *9 if you want to raise your hand. All right, Jonathan, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Mine's mostly a question. I completely understand the motivation and the reason for the neighborhood council to send its directive to city council that hopefully represents the will of the stakeholders to the state. But how does the neighborhood council govern itself? In other words, when I sit in the meetings of the Planning and Land Use Committee, for example, since Toluca Lake, the village is now called a transit-oriented community. That happened without apparently any resistance from the neighborhood council. When I go back and I look at all the minutes, and now miraculously, it seems that everyone in the neighborhood council, the board members, are miraculously against a transit-oriented community that happened under their watch. So that's my question, is how does the neighborhood council govern its own behavior?
Catherine, you want to take that?
Well, the neighborhood council is a series of 2-year terms. So, the people on the board at the time that the statewide law was passed for the TOC are not necessarily the same people that are on the board right now. And with regard to the members of the public that are opposed to the TOC, I don't know at the time that the TOC was passed how much the GTLNC was aware of that state legislation, and how much they were communicating it to the public if they were aware, because of course, the way that it's written, it's sometimes hard to tell whether or not it will affect your community. And the reason that the TOC impacts our community is the definition of TOC happened to be the intersection of 2 major transit lines, which happens over on the Burbank side of us. I don't know that we necessarily would have realized that we qualified at the time that that was being drafted. And people have a tendency, we saw this at our last meeting, to be upset once they realize something has happened, but not be prepared to get involved prior to it happening.
I think a lot of what Catherine is saying is true. I was aware of this TOC situation, although not a member of the board at the time and not nearly as involved as I am now. And I do recall attending a very contentious meeting about it. And I don't recall any action being taken. In fact, I recall an action specifically being avoided. But the fact is, Jonathan, I think, we're all paying more attention now. And we want to get these actions that the community supports, at least on the agenda, and discussed, if not letters of action or requests for action, and moving forward. So I'm very much opposed to overdevelopment. I think too much has been rubber stamped in the past. And that's really probably the main reason I gotten so involved, because I don't want to see, I don't want to see density to the point of living in Manhattan. People like having backyards, and that shouldn't be considered quote unquote immoral, as it has been called by certain state legislators. Anyway, are there any other questions from the public?
Yes, there are. Casey, you're up. You have 1 minute. You might need to unmute.
Sorry, thank you. I live in West Toluca Lake. I'm on the board of the West Toluca Lake Residents Association. And my concern is with there's sales of houses happening here now because of the way the market has been presented, and people are selling, or, people have died and the family needs to sell the house. How can we protect ourselves from this SB 9 and 10 taking hold of our property right now, and not let 4 units, 6 units on a single family property? What do we do to stop it right now when it sounds like we're in flux? It sounds like it passed, but now you're taking an opinion of, well, maybe we need to talk to the city council and get them to not be on board. What is your solution to this?
I'll take that first. So Karen, thanks for being here. So SB 9
Casey.
and SB 10 have passed, and recently the LA City Council was discussing, at least I think, on implementation of SB 9, because this legislation tends to be very complicated, and implementation can be even more complicated, especially as it touches upon so much existing legislation. And I think there's still opportunity to comment and on how it's implemented. I would strongly urge you to look at unitedneighbors.net. They are heavily involved in curtailing overdevelopment, and I can send you some information about that. And we have to pay attention to what's going on moving forward. 4 cities in Los Angeles, unincorporated cities, have filed a lawsuit against over SB 9. So we're following that very carefully. And I think you can find information about that at unitedneighbors.net as well. You need to, get on their mailing list and read up on what's going on and pay attention to that. And I think they're hoping that more cities will join the fight. So that's what's going on right now. But we also have to look ahead. And one of the things we'll be discussing tonight is some of the housing legislation that's being proposed, even though it's still very early stages. There's a lot coming down the pike that I think could be problematic. And that's part of what, last month we organized a standing agenda item for pending legislation tracking. So we're going to do that tonight. And you might also want to start tuning into the Planning and Land Use Committee meetings, which are next Monday night. I think, what is it, the second Monday of every month? So
Correct.
yeah, where we discuss these things in greater detail. And I'm on that committee as well, Karen. So the answer is pay attention, and I will be happy to share some information with you and keep you abreast, at least as far as I know, what's going on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Casey. And I do second what Tess said, as far as planning and land use is probably going to be your best bet for anything related to housing and legislation related to that, but also as any projects come up in the area and anything that requires approval, a lot of the time those planning files end up being presented at planning and land use. So that might be another good resource just to see when actual potential building comes up. All right. Next up, we have a phone number ending in 990. You may need to press *6 in order to unmute.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Annie. I'm in Whitley Heights. Thank you for taking this on. One of the people who was involved in the saga, ongoing saga with these bills, and I know I heard Tess on phone calls many times, and she's an inspiration. I'm very grateful. The RETA numbers that were always being questioned, and I was wondering, the city council here did vote against SB 9 and 10, but it was kind of half-hearted compared to SB 50, where every council member made a speech against it. But we felt it was because they were coming up with the housing element too, which kind of was pretty similar. So when the president, Nuri Martinez, said that it was the most robust housing, blah, blah, in the country, in the nation, and then the state came back at them and said it still wasn't enough. If the RENA numbers are proven to be kind of off a little or overblown, would that help us with this housing element, not being so into overdevelopment and cutting into all of our neighborhoods? Do you know?
I will, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Did you say it's Annie?
Yeah, Annie Gagan.
Oh, hi, Annie. How are you?
Hi.
Thank
I'm
you.
good.
Thank you for your kind comments.
Oh, you're...
Will it affect SB 9 and SB 10? Well, we would hope so, yes. But I think there's a lot in place now and moving fast in order to get this building happening as quickly as possible before people like us can say, hold on a minute, wait just a minute, you-hoo. So we really, and I've been seeing some emails going back and forth between city planning and some local homeowner associations and advocates who are very much advocating against the overdevelopment. And I actually just got an email about an hour before this meeting tonight that planning is trying to, move as quickly as possible before any of this can be put on hold or paused. So we have to be equally on the ball, and I will be happy to share with you, whatever information I have, and just keep an eye on it. And when you see something, share it with me, because there's so much, it's hard for all of us to keep up on it. So thank you.
Yeah, and the Your Neighborhood Voices thing is still alive, right? To go on the ballot, a vote ballot.
That is actually not my initiative, although I know some of the people who were organizing the initiative. I believe they
Yeah.
put it on pause until 2024 in order to have time to gather enough signatures. I believe they may have underestimated how much time it would take to gather the requisite number of signatures to get it on the ballot. And they didn't want to have to go back and do it over. So, but I believe they have a website, and you might want to check that out. My Neighborhood Voices, or Our Neighborhood Voices. Okay, thank you.
Neighborhood Voice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other hands up? Okay. Next up is motion B, recommend standing rule annual meeting procedure for adoption by the GTLNC. Do I have a first to open discussion? Thank you,
Yes.
Tess, and a second.
Sean,
Thank you both. All right. We'll see how long this lasts, but I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
Do you mind, Catherine, I don't know, I think we have people here who are interested in some of the housing legislation. If
you want to do this in a different order?
Yeah, I mean, unless people here object, I don't know if they're here for the standing rules or for the housing legislation. I suspect they may be here for the housing legislation. Perhaps we could have a show of hands. Do you want to?
Okay. I mean, we didn't have to open discussion on this if
No, I
you
mean,
wanted to rearrange it.
well, I'm just, you know, I don't know. What,
Let's do the first standing rule quickly, and then we'll move to the rest since we already opened discussion.
okay.
All right. So this would be for the annual meeting procedure. You're welcome to go to gtlnc.org to download the meeting documents. So this is basically just a rundown of first, when the annual meeting will be held. It'll be held in the month of July at either the regular monthly meeting or a special meeting called in accordance with the bylaws or as directed by Dunn. Sometimes Dunn shifts when we are able to hold these meetings, or we'll need to be involved in calling a special meeting if there's any contentiousness at play. And also at the regular meeting before the annual meeting, there will be an announcement that summarizes what the annual meeting procedure will be so that people know what we're doing at the annual meeting. And that includes selecting the officers, so president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, selecting the standing committee chairs, appointing the second signer, appointing the primary and secondary bank card holders, appointing CIS, community impact statement submitters. There have to be our rule is there should be at least 2. Dunn limits it to no more than 5. And then announcement of the youth seat candidate application period, the instructions and the deadline for application, and when that position will be selected. So that's what the annual meeting would include. And then we've also got sort of the order of operations of how the call for candidates works, the candidate statements, the way that comment works on each of the positions, and then the vote. We did pass a bylaw amendment that hopefully will be in place by this time so that there will be tie-breaking procedures because there weren't last time.
Yeah, and just for those not aware, Catherine would be president, but for a coin toss. So that's yeah. I don't think I like the coin toss.
is in our bylaws now, Des.
Okay, well, all right. And for people tuning in, this is important to establish how this is done because it basically gives us an outline on how to elect the president of the neighborhood council, who, has certain authorities, which, we vote on officers for the neighborhood council. Catherine, could you refresh us? How is this standing rule drafted here different than, in what way is this different from what we already have?
We don't have anything right now for the annual meeting procedure. We mention the annual meeting in the bylaws, and we say that, the officers and the standing committee chairs will be selected at that time. But this codifies what the annual meeting has to have, which includes the second signer, the bank card holder. We added in CIS submitters, and we also included that we have to inform people of how the youth seat will be selected, the application period and the dates, the deadlines and such for that. So, none of those things are mentioned in the bylaws. This is, I don't think, a contentious item. It's more just, here's a piece of paper that actually tells people how this works, because up till now, if you're new to the board, you don't really know how the annual meeting works.
Right. Right. So call for candidates. Each nomination shall accept or decline. Single two committee co-chairs. Okay. I guess, since things have gotten contentious in the past, candidates may not speak during governing board comment. I think that if something scurrilous is said, there should be an opportunity for a candidate to rebut it. So I have a problem with that, because, we've seen people eviscerated, and it's not fair, in my opinion, that someone who is being criticized should not have an opportunity to rebut. We could perhaps put a time limit on that, but that would be very important to me. Length of time, roll call, proceed in accordance, defined. So those are my comments on this.
I mean, do you think that there should be something following, like it would be candidate statements, governing board comment, public comment, and then candidate
Rebuttal?
Yeah, candidate.
I wouldn't call it rebuttal, because we're not really supposed to respond to negative comments, actually. I would call it
Good point. That's a good
Let's
point.
see. At the end of like a official debate, everyone gets to have a final statement, usually, right? Is there like an official term for that in
Maybe like a closing
Forensic Club?
remarks.
Yeah.
Candidate may make a closing remark, because if there,
Okay.
there's things that are said that are simply too juicy not to rebut, for lack of a better word. And if one chooses to do so, one should be able to do so. That's a pretty important concept.
All right. Do we think 30 seconds is a good enough time for a quick closing remark?
No, I mean, I think it should be at least as long as the length of time given to member of the public.
You already have a 2-minute opening statement.
But this would be after, if
Then this would be an unfair advantage, because you'd be getting more time than the general public. On top
Well,
of your candidate statement, you would also
okay.
get
I
30 seconds.
I don't agree, because that if somebody is going to make accusations, the person being accused should be able to, especially given that this is an officer candidate situation. All right, the person being accused should have an opportunity to rebut.
Now, do you then give that? Then do you have to make it so that it's fair and equitable? Do you then give that the other person the opportunity to then make that same 30-second comment, or not same comment, but give them the opportunity to speak again? if they so choose?
Well, I don't think it needs to go back and forth. I think, just once is fine. If the candidate chooses to speak or to defend or rebut or whatever you want to call it.
Honestly, I think Dunn will have a problem with a closing remark, period, but I think they would especially have an issue with us giving twice as much time to a candidate to speak than the general public. Like, it just, I don't think, I understand, and I know, Tess, that you got a lot of horrible things said about you at the last annual meeting, but
I'd like something in there about that. And, if Dunn wants to challenge it, let them. A person needs to be able to defend. That's and that's kind of in the US Constitution. So I think that might overrule Dunn. So
that's not in the US Constitution.
you can, you have to be able to stand and face your accuser. All right. So
this isn't a court of law, Tess.
I have a question. Does Dunn have is there a situation where Dunn has already made a comment on this with respect to this specific scenario as of now?
With respect to this specific scenario, I'm not aware of anything, but I do know that we have been told in the past that we're not really supposed to respond to
negative comments from the public.
Well, we're not really supposed to respond
comments
to comments from the public, period, other than to offer brief clarification or to answer a simple question. This is just generally with the candidate statements. I think 30 seconds should be enough time to say something.
Well, if this wasn't here in the first place, then I don't think we'd be discussing the amount of time. I think at least a minute would be good. And, so it's not a criminal proceeding, but it's still, an important part of the, I believe it's the 6th Amendment, which gives a person a right to stand and face his accuser. So
again, this is not a court of law.
I understand that it's not a court of law, but I feel pretty strongly about this. So why don't we?
Okay, let's do 1 minute.
Okay.
We'll see what Dunn says about this. Jonathan, you can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. I understand what Tess was saying, and I remember. I think it's having to do with the ability to address one's reputation if it's been damaged. So even 30 seconds might be appropriate, something like that. Catherine, I call your attention. Look at the place that says call for I just want you to find this call for candidates #1.
Mm-hmm.
Then count up 3 or 4 lines. And here, just tell me what this sentence means. I don't know what it means. At no time may a slate of candidates be proposed for multiple positions. What is that addressing? What is it?
So this is something that someone tried to do a couple years ago where they wanted to just say, here's the 4 people that would sit in all 4 positions. Let's vote on them just all at once.
Okay.
So that would be a slate of candidates rather than each position having nominations made for that position. This was someone who's proposing, we just say,
Got it.
Maria, Joe, Seth.
Okay, no, I got it. I just couldn't think what it meant. But it means like you have to take everything individually. I understand.
Yes.
Now. Okay.
Yeah.
And then maybe a sentence could be put in there to clarify, Catherine, that at no time may a slate of candidates be proposed for multiple positions. Each candidate must be nominated individually per position or something like that.
I think that's redundant.
Well, if it helps to clarify.
Let's see. Really not doing well with my timer, guys. Sorry. All right. So how does this work? Each position must be nominated and voted upon separately, and no slate may be proposed for multiple positions.
I like it.
That's
Adds a little more clarity. Yeah.
all right.
Okay. Great. Any other comments on this?
Are you doing the second half now or no?
We're just talking about the annual meeting procedure.
Not the part under standing rule committee membership?
No.
Okay.
All right. The only other thing that I was wondering if it would be helpful to add is at the regular meeting before the annual meeting. So we need to pass a budget prior to the end of the fiscal year. I don't know if we want to put that in here, saying that, you know, there will be a budget passed prior to the end of the fiscal year. It's not really an annual meeting procedure. It's an annual procedure that doesn't happen at the annual meeting. So I don't know that it belongs here.
I think we can put that in later.
Okay, great. All right, then let's go ahead and proceed to a vote on standard rule annual meeting procedure as amended. So, okay. Motion B, recommend standing rule annual meeting procedure for adoption. Annual meeting procedure as amended for adoption by the GTLNC.
Yes.
Thank you, Tess. Tess votes
Yes.
Dawn?
I'll say yes. Yes, please.
Also yes. Catherine's a yes. Great. It passes 3-0-0.
Good.
Now, Tess, you wanted to jump ahead to the pending legislation tracking section?
Yeah, thank you. And then we can come back to the other standing rules. So for people joining the meeting, we decided that we wanted to track some pending legislation. Now, half of this legislation I'm not as familiar with because Ren Blight had it agendized and he was going to discuss it. So I will just comment on the ones that I have looked at more carefully and that I am familiar with, and what I think about them, or information I've gathered, shall we say. So it should go without saying that we're still very early in the legislative process. And as Ren said so eloquently, a great deal of horse trading goes on in Sacramento. So some of these bills may die a horrid death, but things can change dramatically. They trade this for that. And today's bill could have little or no resemblance to tomorrow's bill with the same number. So that's why we're tracking it. I will start with, let's see. Okay, Quirk Silva AB 1288. That is an item, a bill that Ren put on the agenda. I don't want to comment on it, although I think it looks like it could be a good idea, but more than that, I'm not willing to say. AB 1910, however, and let me pull up my notes. AB 1910, Garcia, publicly owned golf courses, converting them into affordable housing is a very, very bad idea, in my opinion. And a lot of people who have been, reviewing and tracking this agree. It seeks to allow development of an irreplaceable public open space for housing, public golf courses, public golf courses. That's the public's asset. We don't want to increase density, and our urban areas already require more open space, not less. In addition, I think that because these open spaces are public, they provide a very important and critical source of equity in our communities. Everyone from all income groups should have access to these resources. I think elimination of these assets favors those who can afford private alternatives, and it disfavors the less economically privileged, shall we say. So allowing AB 1910 to convert existing recreational open public space into housing, in my opinion, is irresponsible. So, and it also is alarming that with all of its emphasis on environmentalism, Catherine, you are, a supporter of environmental initiatives, that this growing threat of climate change upon us, how can they seriously propose the loss of such huge acreage of tree canopy? It's just so environmentally unwise. Anyway, the substantial loss, I think, to the environment is far greater than any gain made in affordable housing. So big no on AB 1910 as currently drafted.
I will say, if it is public golf courses, there's often not a wealth of tree canopy on a golf course.
There's plenty. So, but fair enough. It's still open space that cannot be, it should not be used for this purpose. So as it's currently drafted, I'm certainly recommending against AB 1910. Any comments from the public or? All right, so.
There's a hand up, Jill
Young, all right.
Go ahead.
Hi all, and I have a dog barking in the background. I would just like to confirm what you're saying, Tess. I mean, that's madness to get rid of golf courses. I agree, it's one of the last places that everyone can share. And if we just have to go to private golf courses, it's going to be the 1%. This isn't just excluding the poor, it's excluding the middle class, what's left of it. So I think you make a great point. And I'll stop now.
Thank you. Good point. All right. Any other comments? All right. So then I'll move on. So AB 1911, Gabriel income taxes, that is an item that Ren put on the agenda. I'm going to also AB 2006. I'm less familiar with that one. It regards regulatory agreements and compliance monitoring because there's so much legislation. I think compliance monitoring generally is a good idea, but I hadn't taken a very close look at that because Ren was going to discuss it. The next one, AB 2053, would enact the Social Housing Act and would create a California Housing Authority for mixed income housing. I am recommending against that. That's AB 2053. It's a continuation of the state's policy to not subsidize affordable housing, which the state was doing up until I believe Governor Jerry Brown abolished it. Each project here in this bill is envisioned to be self-supporting, but it's rather problematic. Concerns include that the financial structure of this proposal is extremely opaque. It discusses self-supporting projects, but contemplates debt financing for startup and admin costs without limits. So the amount of affordable housing being offered must be stated upfront. One of the general problems with RHNA is that in order to meet the various levels of affordability, huge amounts of market rate housing that are far in excess of RHNA requirements have to be built in order to reach those affordable percentages for low and extremely low income income levels. So what exactly will determine the size of these developments? There's too many vagaries in this bill as it's currently written, AB 2053. And also eminent domain will not be considered, and therefore, well, that's the current understanding, and therefore it must be specifically prohibited within the bill. And another important aspect of this or request is that the community must have input and be part of the process for this bill to be fair to communities. An agency that ignores community planning and input is not appropriate. So, and last, this is, I think, a really important part of this, is that this new proposed government agency would have a board appointed by the governor, and boards should be much more apolitical in nature than they would be if appointed by one individual. So the agency that would impact so many communities, it would seem most equitable for a nonpartisan selection and makeup of the board to be the case. So those are comments on AB 2053, the Social Housing Act. No would be my recommendation as currently drafted. So any thoughts, comments, opinions? Okay, I guess that's none. Oh, we
do have a hand. Jill, go ahead.
Okay, it's me again. If no one else is going to comment, just what we need, another board. That seems to me a bad idea to start with. But I know from an inside story, I knew a crooked developer that I met in a personal growth class. And he described to me the way he circumvented the requirements for adding affordable housing within a complex. The way you describe this, Tess, it sounds as though it could be easily abused. And I think it would be better not to have a proposal out there like this and just let things remain as they are. Maybe, the federal government increases Section 8 or whatever. This sounds as though it's rife for corruption and will just open the door to crooked developers.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things are certainly possible, Jill. I mean, the position that I'm taking, and a lot of people who track this very carefully, is to impose unless amended. And those were just sort of the highlights of the problems with the bill. So I thank you. Thank you for your comments. All right. So
thank you for listening.
Oh, all right. Anyone else?
Okay, David Wheatley, go ahead. You can unmute. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Just arriving. I'd preferred to have gotten here earlier. Looks like we're going through this substantial list of bills and that people have done their preparation, which is fantastic. The lady who just spoke, I would love to find out more about this personal or professional development person and the techniques they've used to get around the law, because I'm noticing this a lot with the developments going on across the city, especially that terrible one at Cahuenga Bloomfield, where there was a massive blowing off of responsibilities by the land use committee and the neighborhood council. Horrific decision making there. I would love to know how developers get this stuff done and how to thwart this and how to put it to the neighborhood council and land use for what they've done. So yeah, if there's any way to get access to your contact information, if you're willing, I would love to have it. Thank you.
Jill, you can feel free to go ahead and email Tess or myself if you would like to be put in touch.
With David Wheatley. All right. Very good. Thank you. So moving on to the next, let's see, AB 2097. Opposed unless amended, vehemently opposed, actually, AB 2097.
And to clarify, anytime Tess says oppose, this is Tess's opinion opposing, not the neighborhood councils. The neighborhood council has not taken a position on any of these.
Okay, so this is AB 2097, strenuously opposed, Tess Taylor, related to land use and parking requirements. It harms low-income residents. It does not recognize fundamental needs of residents in their current and future urban environments. This is this bill as currently drafted would force people to park very far from their home or work, which is a safety issue, and unduly places people at risk who return home or leave work during the evening hours. This bill, in my opinion and other people's, is a huge concession to developers and nothing more. So we object to this approach to solving affordable housing, and I certainly personally object as well. So before removing parking criteria, it is proposed that the state should consider funding public parking structures and free shuttle service if they wish to eliminate parking, because making life more difficult for people is not the way to solve this. There are better ways to produce affordable housing. So no, as currently drafted, on AB 2097. Any comments from the public or questions?
We have a hand up, David.
Okay.
Thank you. I only see two names, two faces on here. I see Sean. Hi, Sean, and
Hey,
Tess.
how are you, David?
Hi. I'm well, thank you, Sean. How are you? Well, I hope.
Yes, sir. Thank
I
you.
don't see any others. That person who keeps talking and unmuting me, I don't see them. I would like to. If you could please.
My internet is not good enough. It has failed many times.
Okay.
Tess and
Okay,
Sean
are
can
you-
attest.
Are you allowed to say your name?
My name is Catherine. I'm the co-chair.
Oh, great. Is there any way we can like have more on you, a last name or something? And I think it's been like 3 or 4 months we haven't been able to identify who you are, and I'd like to know who's representing us. And I
All
oppose
of the
this bill as
information is
well.
available on the website.
Right, but I shouldn't have to go there just to find this out. I have enough trouble getting to this meeting. It should not be that difficult. And as far as this particular one, anything that reduces parking for the developers to force us into mass transit, which is dangerous, is a bad idea. And this should be opposed, vehemently opposed. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. We have Jill as well. Jill, go ahead.
Yes, sorry about that. I'm doing this on my phone. And David, I'm Jill. I don't have my picture up there. I live in West Toluca Lake. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet everybody else. I would oppose it too. Parking is such a nightmare. I'm actually a landlord, and that's something I'm always dealing with tenants. And every new structure that's built should have at least 2 parking spaces per unit. That's just ridiculous. I have a friend on Section 8 who doesn't have a car and has to walk by the transit corridor on Lancashire. She's a woman, and she's frequently accosted by the people who are living in tents there. So when you mentioned danger, Tess, I thought of my friend.
Yes.
And I think that, this city is crazy with parking, and that's just asinine that they would suggest that. That's just a huge accommodation to these developers. So shame on them. Okay, I'll be quiet now. Going on mute.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
All right. I don't see, Joanne. Joanne, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I missed the first part, having some technical difficulties, but basically from what I understand, they're trying to do things to where we're forcing people into mass transit and not providing enough parking. And whatever, we have to stand against that. It is so hard as it is for residents to find parking, and then you have businesses coming in and finding parking, that if you're going to rent an apartment here in, and especially in this area, I mean, it's not a DTLA, maybe you can expect to not be able to park, but out here in Toluca Lake, I think you would expect to have parking or by the red line. And I don't think it's not our job to like coerce and force the hand of people to have to go get, public transit. It's like freedom to choose. You want to drive. I don't want my daughter, who works,
Hi, Joanne.
hello, in Burbank, whatever, even though it's Burbank, I don't want her to, there isn't any buses anyway when she gets off her shift, but by the time she gets home, like it's really late at night. I don't want her having a bike or walk or do public transit. I want her to be able to drive, and I want her to be able to park in my building and be safe. And that's what everyone wants. And if you want a bike and you want to use transit, more power to you. But let people choose. Why would we support anything that prevents that choice? It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. All right, I don't see any other hands up. Tess?
Okay, so
Onwards.
forward. The rest of these are all RENs except SB 1100. I think you were going to discuss. I will say preliminarily let's see, AB 2244, religious institution affiliated housing co-located place of worship, proposes converting 50% of the spaces into affordable housing. Right now, I am unsure that that could go in several directions as to AB 2244. Housing finance programs and development reserves, SB 948. Jumping to the bottom of the list, possible for support for that, but check back with us later because these things are still in the works. But that's what I have for now. And there are a couple of bills that I want to add to this list for tracking for next month's meeting to keep an eye on. That would include AB 682 density bonuses and AB 916 ADUs and bedroom additions. So that's all from me on pending legislation tracking.
What was the
I do
last one,
see a-
Tess? Oops, sorry, hang on.
AB 916
Copy that.
ADUs and bedroom additions.
I see a hand up from David. David, you are able to unmute.
Great, thank you, Catherine. And yeah, I've seen this one come up before. I think it was last session with the legislature. They wanted to have any religious place be authorized or required to give up their parking, half or more. And of course, the religious organizations say, oh, affordable housing, fine, we will look no further. Well, if they'd look a little further, they'll see that the height requirements, the height is way, way excessive. And if they looked a little bit further, they would see that they have neighbors that adjoin their religious properties who are going to be severely negatively impacted if this one passes. This absolutely must not pass. And if somebody could please fill me in on what happens when something, I mean, are you voting on this stuff? Are we just talking to each other? Are you going to send a CIS? Are you sending letters to the legislature? What are you going to do? Thanks.
Well, as of right now, David, we're simply tracking because it's too early in the legislative procedure or process. I think certainly members of the public or the board could weigh in if we chose to. But since so much can change within the space of a week or a month, it's not until the fall that I think things will really get heated. But these are just, and I think you might have been at the last meeting where we discussed this, we decided to have a section, a standing agenda item on pending legislation tracking so that we can update members of the public on what we see going on and things to keep an eye on. And if there's bills that you think should be added to keep an eye on, then let us know.
Okay. Fantastic idea. Thanks.
All right. Any other comments on the pending legislation tracking?
Well, do you have any updates on SB 1100, the Brown Act updates, Catherine?
No, I wasn't aware that I'd been tasked with tracking that.
No, I thought we were carrying that forward because of you, but if not, then not. That's all right. Okay, I think let's keep it on there and I'll make sure that I track it for next time. Okay.
Okay. That was also something that Ren requested.
Oh, did he? Okay, I'm sorry. Well, you spoke so authoritatively about it last month. I thought it was yours, but all right. But I think it's probably important to keep on there. So
we do have two hands up. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thanks. I was just going to mention, that person called in earlier and was talking about SB 9.
Mm-hmm.
SB 9, 4 cities in Los Angeles, Carson, there's cities we sometimes call unincorporated, meaning independently cities in LA County, have sued the state for the non-constitutionality of SB 9. I just went back and double checked because it's so confusing to follow this stuff. But LA City Council voted against SB 9 and SB 10. So for a change, I'm being presumptive that most people calling in are against having this level of intrusion by the government on our personal lives and our economic well-being. But in any case, the LA City Council did vote against SB 9 and 10. And right now, SB 9 is being taken to court by those 4 independent cities. And of course, it will take time, but it is a valid argument. They have two dispositions that they're fighting. In any case, it's not over. No, it's like we saw in the Supreme Court today. A law is never a law unless Congress passes or unless it's in the Constitution. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jonathan. That, yeah, we're keeping an eye on that. And one of the groups that tracks that as well is California Association of Local Electeds, CALE.
David, you also put your hand back up, or did I just not lower your hand earlier?
No, thanks. I did put it back up. I've got this guy tapping on my window at a drive-through. It's very crazy. We got to do something with mental health services in this city, and also something about the crime. I don't see any of these bills dealing with either of that. Maybe there are some, I just don't know. Also, I generally find on the committees that I serve on, there are usually 1 or 2 people out of 10 who are up to date on the issues, and the others are just kind of poking along. I'd be curious to know what's level of homework everybody has done on here, so that's not just 1 or 2 pulling the weight of everybody. If you could fill me in on that, I'd like to know. And let's see what else. Yeah, SB 9. I've heard that courts tend to defer to legislators. So the earlier we get in on this stuff, the better, and the more. And votes are personal to me. So if somebody says, well, you're being personal because this person voted this way. Well, votes are personal. And if somebody's going to vote a particular way and has a bad outcome, they're going to be hearing from me. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay. Anything else on pending legislation tracking?
Not for me.
Great. Then we will move on to motion, should have said motion C on the agenda. It just also said motion B. But recommend standing rule committee membership for adoption by the GTLNC. Do I have a first to open discussion?
First.
Thank you, Tess. And do I have a second?
Sean.
Thank you, Sean. All right, I'm once again going to attempt to share my screen for as long as my internet will survive. Okay. This was drafted. It's a little bit dense, but the high level summary of this is if you want to join a committee, you have to come to at least one meeting of the committee and make a request to join during the meeting, and also submit a written request to the committee chairs, which is mainly so that they have their contact info. And then for newly elected council members, you don't have to necessarily attend the meeting. Like if you want to join the month after you join the GTLNC, you can do that as an actual elected board member. We do have a limitation on the number of council members, which is a done policy that I think has to do with the actual parliamentary procedures. But basically, we can't have a quorum of the GTLNC as a committee. So right now we have 15 board members, including our 1 youth member, which means quorum is 8. Which is 1 above what half would be. So half would be 7.5. So 8 is quorum. And half of that is 4. So there can be no more than 4 board members on a committee. There can be more people because there can be as many stakeholders as you want on a committee, but there can't be more than 4 board members. And this just lays out that the president will determine which council members need to step off of a committee if there are too many council members that want to be on a committee. And then removal from the committee. The committee chair would put the proposed removal on the agenda and also specifically email the committee member that's being considered for removal. At the meeting, the committee member is officially a member of the committee until the end of that meeting. And if the committee itself rejects the removal, then the member won't be removed. If the committee doesn't have an issue with it, the member will be removed. However, part of the reason that some people have wanted to remove committee members in the past is trouble meeting quorum for the committee, which if you're sitting there with a 8-person committee and you have 4 people who just never show up ever, and you're unable to take any action, then you are allowed to, if that person has been absent for 3 consecutive meetings, say they are not a committee member for that meeting at which their removal is being considered. That way, if someone's just not been showing up, then they can't hold up the committee from removing them by continuing to not show up, if that makes sense.
So I have a couple comments. So, we didn't have much time to discuss this, Catherine, before it was agendized, because I mean, you did send me the draft beforehand, but because of the, posting requirements, I didn't really have a chance to make my comments in writing or what have you. So this went forward for that reason. But did you get this standing rule language from another organization standing rules, or?
Nope.
Okay. So.
And I will not be offended if someone doesn't like the way I wrote it.
Well, I mean,
pretty late at night.
It's less how it was written, but the substance of some of it is I don't think is necessary. Request to join, that's fair enough. Making a request in writing, fine. But having a committee chair notify the individual whether they are accepted or not, putting that power in the hands of a committee chair, I don't think I like that. In fact, for sure, I don't. And as to the limitation on the number of council members, I think the distinction needs to be made here, because we have to be wary of quorum issues. All of the board members, elected board members, could be on a committee, I guess, theoretically, but simply they couldn't be committee members. And the distinction is the committee members get to vote, whereas somebody who just attends the committee and is not a committee member does not get a vote. So that's where the quorum issue comes into play. I don't like the, I want this process to be as democratic as possible. And I envision a potential for a situation where, somebody is shaping a committee to be a certain way and excluding some and including others. And that I have a concern with that. So I don't think that's appropriate.
I wanted to jump in here as well.
Go ahead.
All right. So this is my freshman year serving in this committee, and I've learned quite a bit. One of the things that was it was slightly daunting when coming in is trying to kind of like navigate your way through the process. And I think if people are coming in and they want to be a part of a committee, if there's something that they were really passionate about, I wanted to make it so that it's a relatively easy process. I'm not saying, something where we just kind of hand them the keys to the kingdom, but want to make it as in the beginning as less as invasive as possible, to making them jump through all the hoops. I mean, it's bad enough that we have committee members now that are on committees that don't ever attend, which is, wonderful for the removal of the committee member, because that is something that needs to happen, because we have a lot of people that are on committees that simply do not attend, and based on the new rules that we've set up, that will help eliminate those people. But the people that actually want to be on, or the people that are new to this, I'd like to see it maybe not so rigid in terms of the process. I mean, I'd like to maybe, not for the lack of a better term, streamline the process, as it were, or just make it a little bit more user friendly for the incoming people that are coming to join in. So that's just my thought.
Okay, so as far as streamlining, and Tess, we'll get back to your question in just a second. But as far as streamlining, are you thinking just remove the
I mean, because there's three hoops
committee
that they have
chair
to.
notification? Like you just
I
you accept it at the meeting?
I mean, if someone, I think maybe it's like, hey, if someone wants to throw their hat in the ring, maybe make that, the task saying, I'd like to be a part of, the underwater basket weaving committee. Great. And so that gives you the opportunity. And then at that point, once they've kind of been able to throw their hat in the ring, and then that point, then we can have the dialogue with the individual and say, well, this is what needs to kind of happen. And then give them an opportunity to prepare, because at this point it's kind of having everything all at once. Someone's got to, and I'm not sure what the time frame is. I just don't want to see the pressure of like, okay, well, here's the time to be a part of the committee. You got to do everything now. And perhaps people may have not prepared. Perhaps people may have are not ready at that moment. I just want to make it so that the people that want to join have an opportunity to join. And there's, I guess, when not streamline, maybe a little less pressure. I mean, when we first got it, I was kind of recommended for, I think it was the financial position. I wasn't prepared or ready for that. And it was awesome that someone actually had enough faith in me to do that. I would have liked, though, to had, a little bit more background knowledge so that, maybe I could have had an opportunity to maybe look into doing something like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I think, if I may, maybe flesh out a little bit of what you were saying, Sean, I don't think it's too much to ask that somebody actually attend. And we have to make the distinction, or maybe we don't need to make the distinction between an elected board member and a stakeholder. But I don't think it's too much to ask for someone to attend a couple of committee meetings as a stakeholder before they are, brought onto the committee. As far as elected board members are concerned, we were just asked when we were impaneled by Colby, which committees would you like to be on? It was that simple. And, you said this, and this, and that was that. So I would like there to not be an approval process unless we have to have some determination how to select elected board members to be on a committee only if and when a quorum problem should arise. And that would be the thing for a standing rule. So I don't know if that.
I get that. No, and that makes sense. I think that attendance should be mandatory. I just want to make sure that when the opportunity presents itself for the individual to want to jump in or want to throw their hat in the ring, it's not easy, but they've done their, they come to the meetings. I think that's absolutely paramount. I can agree with you more, but I think that I just want to make sure that the people that actually do attend and want to be a part of a committee should make sure that their process is relatively easy. And again, maybe this is more or less for the new people, and maybe that should be clarified. So that's all I'd like to say.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things. First, this should just say eligible stakeholders may request to join a committee by attending at least one meeting, make the request at that meeting, and submit a written request to the chairs. Shall we just say the individual will be added to the committee prior to the next regular meeting of the committee? And that way, there's no sort of approval process, they're just added. And Sean, I think, I would like to see us do a better job training people.
I agree.
And I think that, I don't know if I want to put it in the standing rule necessarily that like the committee chairs are responsible for reaching out to that person and explaining more about what the committee does and what being a committee member means.
Maybe that's, once the person's kind of committed, maybe it's incumbent on them to reach out. Make them do the work, because that's part and parcel.
Or I think more importantly, not a rule, but a recommendation. When people join your committee, they should, give them the template or a memo or this is some
Guide.
a guide, yeah, some guide, like Kelly Cole wrote a really nice guide for incoming board members before she departed, something along those lines. This is what to expect. But that would be just a guide or a recommendation. I don't think it should be a rule, because as we've seen, we're not exactly flooded with stakeholders rushing to be on our committees. It's just
Your words.
so which people who attend our meetings regularly, please consider joining a committee. What problem is this standing rule trying to solve, Catherine?
It's just explaining how you join a committee so that people know
Okay.
how to.
Okay, yeah, I
'Cause
mean,
I think a lot of people have no idea how to
Okay.
join a committee.
Okay, well, then that's good. As long as, I do not want to see approval of people in the hands of one person, because, I don't like the idea of
So
committee.
Tess, how would you suggest that be resolved? Because I feel like I worry adding to already lengthy general board agendas to decide who gets to be on a committee. It's a lot.
Have we had that problem?
Yeah, on 3 of our committees this year, including this one.
Well, that's quorum of quorum, and it seems to have resolved itself. I don't recall anybody strenuously objecting to stepping down from a committee. And, so yes, let's address it. But I think that's a discussion, because as we've seen, there are some board members on committees who are far less participatory than others, and they can just be asked, or with the new bylaws in effect, people who don't show up will just simply be notified and removed.
Well, yes, people who don't show up may be notified and removed, but if there are 5 people who actively want to be on a committee, there needs to be someone that determines who doesn't get to stay on the committee, whether that is the committee chairs, whether that is the president, whether you think that needs to be a vote of the general board. Sorry, 5 board members on a committee.
Well, have we not handled that sort of gently on a first come, first served basis up until now?
I mean, on the one hand, yes, that would be fair. On the other hand, I'm on 4 committees. Maybe if I were on 4 committees, even as an active participant, and someone else was interested in joining one of those and couldn't because we were at quorum of quorum, it should be me that would be removed, because I'm already on so many committees and, to make room. And yeah, it'd be great if someone was willing to step aside, like I would be. But if you have a board member that just wants to overextend themselves like that, and you can't convince them not to, I feel like we need to have some methodology for someone stepping in and saying, hey,
well,
this is how we're going to decide this.
Yeah, okay. I think first a discussion between the committee chair and, the committee members to reassert their commitment. And if anybody wants to step off voluntarily at that point, and then after that, if that doesn't work, some procedure could be put in place. Let's see here. If more than the allowed number of council members per department want to join a committee, then the committee chair shall determine will be committee members present shall not notify committee chairs later than 1 week to the next week. I'd like to hear what members of the public say about this. So if we could open it up to public comment, limitations of the number of council members on a committee, and just, so that if more elected board members wish to be on a committee, then that committee can tolerate, in order to remain compliant with our quorum of quorum bylaw, what should we do?
All right.
members of the public have to say about this.
First up,
Okay.
we have Lee and Joanne.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. This is Joanne, but Lee is on here too. I just want, well, first of all, one thing is I would really like to find out, because I'm the process of how to get on just a committee without getting on the board. I guess I could email Tess, because I would like to get on one of your committees. And I would also question how come, like, I would hate to see where a chair gets to pick who's on the board, because then you could cherry pick what you want philosophically, politically, and that's no good. It should be a quorum vote that everyone who's ever on that committee, a quorum vote. And that to me, that's a democratic, fair process, not one person picking everyone, because then you could pick whoever you want, and that's not fair. That's just my comment. And I missed the other question that Tess had. I know I'm sure I have an opinion on it, but that's so far, what I have to say.
The quorum of quorum, and it's, if I've elected, I think somebody is not muted, and I accidentally raised my hand and I don't know how to unraise it. I think we're getting some feedback. Okay, so I guess you sort of addressed it. Joanne, why don't we hear what other members of the public have to say? And Catherine, could you lower my hand? I don't know how to do it myself.
Sure.
Lower hand. Good. Okay.
Dun, dun, dun.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Next up is David. Go ahead.
Thank you. These are important. This is an important topic because this determines who gets to vote. And the people who vote a particular way get to carry the day, and this can feed its way all the way up through the board and all the way up to Sacramento. So this is very important, who gets to vote. I would suggest that if somebody misses 3 consecutive meetings, they're automatically off and they have to petition to get back on or go through the acceptance process, which I think should be having attended 2 meetings. And at the beginning of the 3rd meeting, they get to vote. I don't think any special privileges should be afforded to neighborhood council members. With a few exceptions, I've not really found them to be any more on the ball or any smarter than anybody else. And there should be no special privileges for them. Also, I think chairs should not be appointing anyone. It should be done by majority vote. So these people get vetted and they don't cherry pick people, especially when we can't see who the co-chair is. And we don't really know who the person is. We don't know their last name. We don't really know anything about them. Thanks.
Brought in. Okay.
We'll remind that all of my information is available on the GTLNC website, and my last name has been said multiple times this evening. It's Hatton.
Okay. But to clarify, David, and I'm a proponent of having, as many people on the committee who want to participate. We do have an upper limit for elected board members because of the quorum of quorum issue. That's really the nub of it. But maybe we have a comment from Jonathan.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
I would add, when I read this, it's kind of complicated, but I can understand what Catherine was trying to do to keep it from becoming a 10 chapter book. When Catherine was writing this, it looks to me, Catherine, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but Catherine had the task of writing this for the original board members who are going to be put onto a committee. And also as an ongoing, if we get too many board members wanting to be on it, in other words, she's trying to keep it so that it flows both at the origination of a committee and during the life of the committee. So it's hard for Catherine, I can see, to word it so it covers everything. But when I look at it, maybe because of what Tess said, maybe Catherine could add at one of these paragraphs before going to the president or the chair to ask someone to leave the committee. First,
voluntarily,
volunteers, just add that in. But I actually do understand how difficult this was for Catherine to write, because she was dealing with when a committee is originating and during the life of it. And I think what that's, I think it was David said, remember the committees aren't, very rarely are they deciding something. They're making recommendations. They're making a not, what do we call it? Support of or not supporting something. And anything that actually happens in a council goes to the general meeting for a full vote. So I think it's hard for Catherine to write this thing to begin with. I can see it. It looks like a task, Catherine. And I think you did the best you can. But I think if it has difficulties, it's not the end of the world. You know, it's hard to address ongoing as well as origination.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you know, you make a good point, Jonathan, and thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I just remember to, you know, want to join, and then the committee chair shall ask interested council members to volunteer to retract the request to join. If not enough volunteers step down, then the chair shall request the president to determine which, okay. Is that something that should be voted on? I mean, I guess there's a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah, I really, as much as I support everyone having a say, at a certain point,
We got to get to the business of getting to the business.
Yeah, Catherine's right. It's just crazy to pick it all apart. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think it's.
Okay, so then just
do you
ask.
want to say that the chair may determine, or that the chair has the president determine?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean,
The president, because the president is not on the committee. You don't want the person in the committee deciding the future of the committee. So I think it's better to do the president. I wouldn't be the one to say, put it in the hands of the president, but in this case, I think it's better to have a person not on the committee deciding it if the president's not on the committee.
Well, he may or may not be, but that sounds reasonable to me. So go for that, Catherine.
Okay, great. So we've basically added this part where the chair will ask the council members to either step down or retract their request to join. If there aren't enough that volunteer, then the chair will ask the president to decide.
We have like a gladiator event.
Probably it'll be a flip the coin, roll the
Yeah.
dice. That's how I determine a lot of things. Just
Okay.
roll the dice. All right. Anything else on the committee membership standing rule before we proceed to a vote?
No, let me look at what you've written. I think
It should be available on screen share, assuming
yeah.
people shared.
Want to join a commission? Okay. All right. I think that's fine. Propose a notice in writing the committee on the agenda of a meeting of the committee, removal from committee. And is that will remain a member until the conclusion? Is that just because of a grievance or an overabundance of people, the removal from the committee, or that people on the committee can't stand the committee member? What would trigger a removal from the committee?
I mean, yeah, any number of reasons. Obviously, if the member hasn't been attending, then, you know, they'd be removed from the committee, and there would be an agenda item stating that they were removed, so that if they wanted to show up and be like, hi, I've been in the hospital for the last 3 months, but I want to be on the committee, like, they can show up and say that. I do think that there may be situations where there is a committee member that is particularly disruptive, or that there have been issues with. And, you know, this is sort of trying to thread that needle of giving the opportunity to remove them, but also not removing them without it being some measure of a conversation, so that, you know, if like the chair shows up and says, I want to remove this person, and everyone else on the committee is like, no, we want to keep them, then the chair can't just unilaterally remove them. But if most of the committee is like, yeah, this person is causing a problem, then you can remove them.
I guess I Yeah, I mean, some sort of procedure is a good idea. Sean, what do you think?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think Catherine's right. I think we should, I mean, it's the lesser of two evils. If there's one person that is everyone feels is a disruption or is not pulling their weight, and it's kind of universally accepted, then I think that it should be. But if it's one person that everyone seems to like, I get that. I think that's definitely the way we should go. Because again, this is something that was been kind of a source of frustration for me, is that we do have all these people that are here and we have a lot of people that are not attending, but they're on the committee meetings. So I'm all for the idea of just trying to get people to move on so that we can get to the business of getting to the business.
Yeah, because you're on public safety, right? And didn't you have like 3 months or something when you couldn't actually vote on anything, have a meeting because you weren't getting quorum?
That is 100% correct.
Yeah. So, all right. Are we ready to proceed to a vote on this one?
I think so.
Yes, please.
Awesome. All right. On motion C, not motion B, recommend standing rule committee membership as amended for adoption by the GTLNC. How do you vote, Tess?
Yes.
Thank you. How do you vote, Sean?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion carries 3-0-0. Tess, I will send you these updates and please take a look and make sure that I have not done an egregious typo.
All right.
Whoops. Sorry. And that is all for our ongoing business, new business and future projects. One thing that we have on here is we'd like to identify and invite our assembly member, state senator, and invite our assembly member and state senators, legislative,
I made those things happen on my nose.
Analysts to come speak. And Tess, I guess this is somewhat related. I'm going to be stepping down as chair, but remaining a member of this committee because I'm going to go help out and co-chair outreach. Paige has stepped down as chair of outreach. And I am but one human, so I can't chair 3 committees. So Tess, are you interested in spearheading those invitations? Do you need help with that?
No, I can do that. And so I guess first we should say thank you, Catherine, for your service. Your knowledge of parliamentary procedure is tremendous, and I'm glad you'll stay on board. So sure, we'll go forward with that. Now, this was suggested, this new business, identify and invite assembly member, state senator, legislative analysts. That was Ren's idea, which I think is a great idea, but I didn't look up who they are or invite them. But I will go ahead and do that, and also find out when the best time for that would be. And I recall David Wheatley saying, I believe it was at last month's meeting, that the earlier we get into the process, the better. And while I would generally agree, the legislative process is such a sausage factory. Things change so quickly from one day to the next. So I guess we'll just try to get them as soon as we can. And if we have to have a repeat appearance before something actually goes to a vote, then maybe we can, try again. But my feeling is the closer they get to, the closer they get to a vote, the harder it may be to get any of the legislative analysts. Would you have a thought on that, Catherine or Sean?
I think in all honesty, it's going to be hard to get them regardless. So I think probably we're going to get 1 or 2 visits, like 1 from each office. But are you envisioning this as them coming to speak on specific bills, or them coming and we can ask them questions? Because I assume that we aren't able to get them to come, and speak multiple times to us. Realistically, that's just not a thing that's going to happen.
Well, probably not. Again, this was Ren's idea, which I think is a good idea. So speak on, guess I guess we'd have to determine in advance which bills are of greatest concern to us as a committee and as a council, which is why I think this legislative tracking standing item is really, really good. I just sort of scan the news and look at what's going on, and I'll just, I pulled a couple here that I want to put on the agenda for next time, AB 916 and AB 682, just as I was scanning through some resources that try to track this legislation. So the answer to that question is we should ask them to comment on a handful of bills that are most important to us, and then wild card, ask them what are the legislators, the assembly member or senators priorities, and how can we tell us what we need to know as a community, that kind of thing.
All right, yeah, I mean, I think if we can identify the priorities and be able to request, because of course there are multiple people on staff that probably have different focuses. So it'd be nice to get the person who actually has some expertise in the bill or bills that we're most interested in. I suspect it would be more easy to get their field rep to come, who might not have a lot of intimate knowledge of the bills, but could speak broadly on them. But it might be good to at least provide whoever comes, whether it is a legislative analyst that actually has expertise in the bills, or just a field rep that has a general knowledge of what the assembly member or state senator are working on. Just provide them with a list of these are the bills that we're interested in as a committee, so that they can prepare.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with the legislative analyst before I would go with the field rep, but
I'm saying I don't know that we'll get a legislative analyst. They might send a field rep.
We'll shoot high. How about that? All right, any comments from the public?
We have Jonathan. Go ahead.
Thanks. I would recommend, rather than investing a lot of time in inviting people in to talk about these SB and AB things, it's pretty confusing even when you spend time reading about it. I think that I ask myself, what do I expect out of the neighborhood council? I expect the neighborhood council to be performing its mandate, which is to send out those directives toward the city government, because that's the only thing you can really do. So I think it's a better idea for this committee to focus in on that duty, because when I look at some of the other neighborhood councils, I mean, they're shooting them out like a machine gun. They're real comfortable with it. And when I ask myself, why are they doing it? It's because that's the only thing they can actually do. And I do think at some level, the written word has a much heavier influence than anything we can say with our mouths. Talk is free, not even cheap. So I think that this committee would be better suited to preparing CISs, community impact statements, or I forget the name of the other one. There are three.
Letters of action.
That's it. Okay. All of those sort of things to go to the general meeting. And of course, I mean, you have to figure out your position and make sure it's harmonious with the community. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan.
I would actually agree with that. I'd like to see a lot more letters going out on where we stand on things. And they don't have to be complicated. They can be pretty simple, straightforward. We support this, and this, or we oppose this, and this. So yeah, thank you for that, Jonathan.
All right. Anything else?
Any guest speakers? I'd like to maybe get a couple other guest speakers on here, but I will, do I have to propose them now, or we can get, okay. Yeah. I want to do a little bit of research. I've got some ideas. So very good.
Great. All right. We will close the meeting at 8:19 p.m. Thank you all.
All right.
Have a lovely evening.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night, everybody.